All right, I will call this meeting to session at 6:01. We'll start with a roll call. Jenny? Here. Glenn?
Here.
Merle?
Here.
Kelsey? Here. Blake?
Here.
Robert? Not here. All right, if you'll join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, before I turn it over, I will just give a friendly reminder that we do not have public comment tonight. But thank you so much for attending. All right.
All right. Well, we're really excited to have this Budget 101 presentation from our new business manager, Kim Dowd, and take it away, Kim.
Wonderful. Yes, thank you all for joining us tonight. I really want to thank our budget committee members who've joined us here tonight at our board work session. And so before we get started, it's important to highlight the importance of our compliance with local budget law. So because tonight is a board work session and not a formally noticed budget committee meeting, participation is limited to our board members. However, as I've shared, I'm more than happy to meet with budget committee members one-on-one and help set us up for success in our upcoming budget committee meetings in May. So tonight's Budget 101, our goal for tonight is to we're going to highlight just a couple of details of the budget committee's roles and responsibilities. We're going to talk about the 2026-27 budget process and timeline, some key priorities and focus, and then some essential considerations in forecasting as we go through this important work. Our budget committee is made up of 14 volunteer members. We have our 7 board members as well as 7 budget committee members who, thank you very much, volunteer for a 3-year term and play an absolutely critical role in ensuring our budget meets the goals that the board has set forward for us, that the district has, and that our stakeholders are well informed of what's going on. So the budget committee's charge is essentially to align the resources, meaning the money that we have, with our priorities and then help ensure transparency to our stakeholders. So the budget committee is going to receive a proposed budget that will have been worked on for months. We have been working on a lot of forecasting, a lot of projections, and then a lot of historical looking at trend data, trying to figure out, are there areas that we can maybe, find ways to operate more efficiently, and where do we need to invest? At that first budget committee meeting, will be a need to elect a budget committee chair. And that is something that the committee will do just right as we get started. And then you will be examining the proposed budget. Again, this is the budget that's proposed by administrators, superintendent, of course, your department leaders. You're going to hear public comment. It is critical that we provide opportunities for our stakeholders to provide feedback on that proposed budget. If necessary, there could be revisions requested to that proposed budget. We're going to talk a little bit more about when revisions would be appropriate and what we can and maybe may not have the authority as a budget committee to do. And then the budget committee's main purpose is to approve a proposed budget. So there's 3 stages to the budget. We're going to propose a budget to the budget committee, 14-member committee. The 14-member committee is going to approve a proposed budget with or without revisions. And then the school board will receive that approved budget and consider it for adoption. So the budget committee is responsible for a very careful review of the proposed budget. Now, those of you that have done this before realize it is a riveting multi-100-page document. But our goal as a district is to break that down and highlight key changes and how that is going to best serve our students and our stakeholders. But we ask our budget committee to ask questions and really understand the assumptions that go into building that budget. How are we coming up with projections for property tax collections? How are you coming up with what you think you might spend on X versus Y? So those are the questions that we want to engage our entire budget committee with. We really need to discuss financial priorities and sustainability for the district. So what's key today, what's key tomorrow, and how do we make sure that those investments that we're making today are going to be able to be sustained long-term? And then, of course, the budget committee is approving that budget, but also approving the tax rate that each of us receive on our property tax bills to take into consideration our debts and things that need to be paid. It's important to point out the budget committee is not responsible for making individual personnel decisions and cannot make compensation decisions. Those are defined in other agreements with our staff. And the budget committee is not responsible for managing the actual operations of the district or the programs itself. In the slides, which are linked on the board memo, there is a link to the Oregon Department of Revenue's local budget law document, and it actually does outline some of those keys. Also on the memo is a link to the OSBA, Oregon School Board Association Budget Committee Handbook, which has a lot of great resources as well. Our timeline is linked in the memo and presentation as well, but our first official budget committee meeting is scheduled for May 14th. And after a lot of discussion with our board earlier in the year on this timeline, the second one is very quickly after that on May 18th. And then a budget hearing, which is the official board meeting at which the approved budget is presented for adoption on June 8th. So I really just want to point out these timelines are very, very carefully curated. State law still requires certain budget notices to be published in a local printed newspaper. As newspaper prints and publication dates are becoming more and more difficult, we have to essentially start our timeline by calling the newspaper office and finding out when their deadlines are, because there are specific numbers even that must be presented in each of those. So this timeline is really pretty set in stone because we must make sure that we have sufficient time to get notices to the newspaper, get those published, and then should the June 8th budget hearing, which is the school board meeting, should there be a need for a follow-up meeting to actually adopt that budget, we have to make sure that that can happen before the June 30th state deadline. And then most critical, that tax levy that is being approved must be to the county assessor's office by July 15th. Or as some districts have had, they do not receive property tax collections in time. And that definitely is a budget concern. So the priorities for our 2026-27 budget. Our priorities, we want to be student-centered. Students are why we're here. That's what we do every day. We want to increase access for our students. We need to attract, we need to retain our students. And we want a budget that can allow us to find measurable impacts to find out what is the outcome of those investments. Additionally, fund balance is a very important piece. This has to do with how much money is set aside in reserves for planning for future long-term stability. Again, we're going to be talking about why that's so critical, and increased transparency. I'll talk a little bit about that. So listing these is one piece, but I really want to talk about why. Why are these the priorities that we're talking to you about tonight? So student-centered, really every budget decision should support our students' learning, growth, safety, and opportunity. Increasing access. Students learn best when those obstacles are removed. If they can't be present and engaged, their opportunities to learn are limited. Attracting and retain. Stable enrollment strengthens our programs, strengthens our funding, and it increases opportunities. Measurable impacts. Gonna just say it, comfort in how we've always done it should never replace an understanding of what works best today. Our fund balance, financial reserves protect our classrooms and our programs during unexpected challenges. Long-term stability, students benefit from consistent programs, staffing, and supports year after year. And then increased transparency. Clear, transparent budgeting is going to help build trust, and it ensures the resources reach the students where you, as our budget committee, intend. Every line in this budget that we will be bringing to you represents a choice about how we're going to support students. So when it comes to resource allocations, again, resources have to do with what do we have as far as money? When you see the budget and it talks about resource requirements, that's talking about how much money we need. Put this together to show you, where does the money come from? State school fund, far and away the biggest piece of income for a school district. Property taxes are a significant piece of income, and grants are another large piece of our revenues. The other might be private donations, it might be some fundraising efforts. It's common school fund. There's a couple just smaller pieces that don't technically qualify in any of these other pieces, but this just shows you the importance of three major categories and where our funding comes from. But then where does it go? It goes to wages and it goes to benefits. Those are our big pieces. Transportation, if we can't get the kids here, then we have no one to serve. From there, we go into the purple slice, contracted staff. Essentially, that's wages and benefits for people that we don't employ, but we partner with Willamette ESD. We might have a nurse, we might have a behavior specialist. Expanded education, that's what we're going to partner with Willamette Career Academy or a GED program with another district. Again, paying for staff to provide education to our students. Substitutes, it's staff. So we've got a little slice of the pie there for some reserves. We've got a little bit of supplies and materials. We've got repairs and maintenance, insurance and legal. We can't operate without insurance and certain legal costs. But I wanted to show this to show the budget really is focused on humans, and we are in the people business. That is where the budget goes. And so this is just giving you a general idea of where those expenses are. Trends and forecasts. This is going to be absolutely critical for us to consider. This is an enrollment chart of North Marion School District from 2015-16 school year down to the green line of this year and what we're projecting for the next 2 years in orange. Unfortunately, it's a pretty static trend line and it's going down. The next slide I wanted to show where we've been in our student to staff ratio. How many students, if we were to divide them equally amongst all staff, how many students are assigned to each staff member? Again, the green line is this year. We did have an increase in our student to staff ratio this year. As you know, we went through a very painful reduction in force last year. I still want to point out it is important to understand that we have had different ratios in the past, and we will continue to be looking at what we can do to continue to maintain the smallest class sizes we can, to maintain the supports we can. But this is a key indicator of, with our finances going to people, this is a key indicator of that. Wanted to show you this trend line. The blue line is our enrollment, and the orange line is our staff to student ratio. So if we assume a ground zero, if you will, or 0 point in the 2015-16 year, and I'm just picking that year. I'm not saying it was perfect at that year. I just picked a starting point. If our students and staff ratio was equal there, the gap is continuing to widen. And there is no doubt that student needs are changing. There is absolutely no doubt. But the funding model has not changed. So this is something we look at to figure out if our enrollment has cumulatively dropped over 30%, but our student to staff ratio is still at just a 10% reduction. That does help provide some context for some of the financial strains. Not, again, not saying that where we are is where we should be, or where we were was where we should be, just defining some of the strains in public education, and this is not specific to North Marion. Looking ahead, we need to plan for unknowns, but more importantly, plan for financial stability. This slide shows the enrollment by grade, by school year, back to 2017-18. It got a little too small if I put 2 more years on there, so I apologize, it's a little different lenses there, but you know, we really use this information to show that, as with most public school districts, we are seeing declining enrollments. Birth rates are continuing to decline locally, nationally, and the state school fund is essentially a big pie. It's sliced up between all 196 school districts based on student enrollment. So an overall decline in state enrollment could simply mean less slices and bigger pieces of the same pie in theory. So that would be true if district enrollment was declining at similar rates. Unfortunately, this is North Marion's slice of the state pie. We were at approximately 0.336 or 0.337%. So that is, yes, a fraction of 1% of the state school fund. However, we are now down to just barely over 0.30%. So what's happening is the decline here in North Marion is outpacing that of other districts. So our slice is indeed shrinking, which creates actually greater financial strain as student needs increase for us just the same as they are for everyone else. Many of our grants are also tied to this same calculation, so it disproportionately is impacting North Marion in our slice of those funding streams as well. But you know, despite challenges, North Marion is extremely strong. I am absolutely impressed. Our staff are our #1 resource. They have been pillars of strength after a really significant reduction to our prior staffing levels. But ongoing adjustments to changes in enrollment and our student needs will be critical. But we can be methodical and we can be collaborative, and we'll continue to strengthen our financial stability both today and moving forward. This is showing that we are projecting an increase in our ending fund balance for the end of the current school year over last year. And these will need to be considerations that we continue to think about. What does that ending fund balance, meaning our savings, our carryover for the next year, what does that need to be? And does it need to remain intact? Does it need to be used to help fund the next year? Those are the pieces that we continue to look at. So with that, I just want to be very clear that I believe North Marion's in a comfortable position, but we are declining in enrollment. We must continue to adjust to the funding that we have available and take those priorities into account. What is really measurable? What can we find that is, yes, that is absolutely moving the dial for kids, or, you know, maybe we've always done that. Does it have the impact that we really want it to? So we have wonderful administrators who know our programs and will be, you know, able to help identify those things. But I just, despite some difficulties, I think if we invest in those priorities, we can bring kids back. We can keep kids here, and we can slow the trend. One of the things I wanted to point out a couple slides back on our enrollment by grade, by school year, is that for this school year, you know, at the time this snapshot was made, 152 seniors and only 90 kindergartners. That alone is going to just naturally continue this trend line that you see. Our kindergarten grades are just, they're coming in smaller. So the math is not going to change, but we can continue to adapt and make sure that we are the school district that our students and our families choose to come to, and make sure that we're here for the long term. So I appreciate everybody's time with that tonight. I hope it provides a foundation for what we're gonna be bringing to you. Didn't get into a lot of technical weeds tonight, but wanted to set a foundation for the approach on how we're gonna go with that, so.
Board members have questions?
Anything?
Not really, not right now.
What are the limits on the property tax levy?
So property taxes are quite interesting. So there was Measure 5 was passed a number of years ago, which has created what they call compression on property tax increases. So while values may go up, more market values, as they would call it, assessed values are limited by Measure 5. So there becomes a compression ratio in which the values of the properties do not necessarily reflect the assessed value. For those of us that get the bill, we love seeing our market value in one place and our assessed value somewhere else. For those who rely on those funds to operate, Measure 5 did create a significant impact for school districts and essentially reduced the pace at which property taxes could keep up with the costs of school district operations. So there is some really interesting, accounting nerdy stuff that talks about the compression loss is what they call it. I don't have that available to me right now, but our property tax increase is typically going to be in the 2.5% to 3.5% movement, despite what the market might do. And of course, property tax revenue for a school district is directly tied to the checks that are written. So in an economic downturn, school districts actually receive less revenue when people cannot afford to pay their property taxes. So it's a very unique flux, but generally we receive approximately 95.5% of what is assessed in any given year. Some people choose to take the discount and pay the big bill in November. Some choose the 1/3 payments, but we receive the money as it is actually paid to the county.
I was gonna ask that on the 3%. How does that affect the school? Do you get the money when it comes in then, or?
Yep. We do. So in a way, then you hope you're gaining interest on the lost discount, if you will. Interest rates have been phenomenal the last couple of years. I am extremely concerned for next year's budget. We have been fortunate to be receiving about $300,000 a year in revenue and just interest. The rates, I'm getting notices every couple of weeks that they are going down. So that could be a revenue loss. You think about that, that's essentially free money, as everybody talks about it, right? That has been a great little boost, but that could be a 300,000, wouldn't be 300,000, but let's say we lost half of it. That's $150,000 revenue hit just because of the economic conditions.
Could you extrapolate a little bit on your pie chart when you had, so it was property taxes, state fund?
Yep.
Do you know the percentages there? Or?
I don't have that Excel sheet open right now.
That's
I did
okay.
not throw, that's linked to
Is
my
it
Excel sheet.
proportion to how it?
Essentially, we're looking at, it's,
I mean,
I
I
know.
Not on this one, it's where it broke out property taxes.
The one before.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, if it was PowerPoint, it would tell us,
No
but I
problem.
still use the Office suite and,
No problem.
yeah, sorry. So I copied it in as an image.
I was just surprised the property taxes weren't a bigger percentage.
Our state school fund is definitely our largest piece in that for sure, so.
And surprised to see the grants take such a, they're equal, are they larger than the property taxes?
So, right, with the growth in grants, so student investment account, high school success, some early literacy. We have a comprehensive literacy grant this year. The grants have grown really to be a critical source of operations for districts, which is also concerning, right? Because grants are not in statute, like some are. but not all of them are in statute like state schools fund. Some of them are tied to the corporate activity tax, which regardless of how we feel about it, but when they're tied to that, again, the market really plays a bigger role in state schools than I think we realize. So yeah, it's.
And Kim, correct me if
Yes.
I'm wrong, but you know, if a district were to receive, let's say, more money in property tax, don't they adjust your state school fund?
So absolutely. So I would love to share that with you guys sometime. I did a presentation on your state goes in and figures out for your state school fund, the full formula, they figure out what's your slice of the pie. But they make sure no district gets treated better, if you will. So they take your slice of the pie and they say, well, how much are you gonna get in property tax? Okay, we're gonna take that away from what we give you as a state, so that the other communities who have much higher property taxes, who might bring in a greater slice, their slice of state school fund actually goes down. If we were to receive additional income from federal forest fees, so I believe it's Alsea or Neocon. Jewel. They receive so much money in federal forest fees that they get zero state school fund. Because they figure out what's your share of the state school fund, and then they back out what you get, because the goal is to provide equivalent education to students, regardless of other income sources that those districts may have available to them. So it is it's a pretty complex piece. Teacher experience goes into that, believe it or not. The longer your teachers have been in your district, the more state school fund you receive, because every district, essentially, their salary scale is built on how many years of experience you have, you get paid more. So to equalize that playing field and have the schools who maybe have more senior teachers, or schools, districts that may have younger teachers, you actually have an adjustment to how much state funding you get based on your teacher experience.
Well, that's interesting.
Mhm.
All right.
Anything else?
Sorry, I was a little bit of a rabbit hole, but yeah, it's
No,
not,
you're good.
And to our budget committee members, no one's gonna be offended if you get up and walk out. But although the rest of the meeting isn't too detailed, isn't too long, but you know, just putting that out there. So I've asked Diane to actually take the next agenda item, because she manages the transfer in and out process, so I'm gonna turn it over to her.
All right, well, thank you. In the memo that I provided, it's just basically kind of what we have done last year and the year before that. I did some number crunching, and our ins and outs are still in that, 5 or 6 from October or from last year. So that's good. That's actually good. So a big drop has not occurred, which is encouraging. And as you heard from Kim, our declining enrollment. So we're taking, for the transfers in, we'll take students, I think, 12th grade, we like to kind of do that case by case and kind of see where the student's at. And then the transfers out pretty much reflects kind of what our neighbors are doing in Canby, in Gladstone, in Beaverton, Oregon City, Westland, Wilsonville. So kind of took that approach to it for a recommendation.
So essentially, this is something that you approve every year, and so at the March board meeting, we'll ask you to approve the recommendation on the transfers in and out. Correct, Diane?
Yeah, actually, technically, if you want, you can approve it tonight. For me, the sooner the better, because then I can start processing transfers in and transfers out.
Is the. No, you're good. Is this criteria? Closed except for an online public charter school or a hardship, the same criteria and rubric that we've used in the past?
Mhm.
Okay.
So the hardship definition is defined in statute.
Yeah, I see that. Is this our same process from this year?
I mean, we have not changed our process.
Okay.
The only new language that you're
Okay.
seeing is on the online,
Mm-hmm.
because we're not really able to deny them out. I mean, if we did, then they'll appeal at the ODE level and they're gonna be out anyway. And that's that 3% cap that you see sometimes they put a resource down at the bottom. Because we don't have online options, and so
Wouldn't we also allow them to transfer out for homeschool? Would that just be unenrolling?
I don't get requests for homeschool.
Oh.
That's not an approval process.
But it's not that they would be denied if you wanted to homeschool.
They would withdraw, or basically withdraw, and then technically, legally, they're supposed to sign up with the ESD as a homeschool student, but that isn't necessarily enforced or monitored. We do get the enrollment of those who've enrolled in homeschools through that have been, so the WSD will say,
Oh,
hey,
okay,
this is how many students are currently enrolled as homeschool students
that are in your district.
that are in our district, yeah.
Actually, I have been tracking those as best as I can, and I will check with the secretary and Power School why they went out
Mhm.
or if they went out. And a lot of times they're not even in Power School, so that tells you they live in our district, but we don't know
Mhm.
where they are, so they've never enrolled. So that's just a choice that family wants to make.
What-
I would say there's a handful of students that's what's gonna work for them better, that were here.
Yeah.
Really not a lot.
Do we know how many are online charter students?
Online charter, we have about 82,
Wow.
but that's, like last year it was 87.
Mhm.
So that's that means
Yeah.
only 5 more. Okay. Thank you. Yes, you should say.
How does it work with sports with homeschool students? No, I believe that, I heard there was something with a certain sport that we were only gonna have a student and it was a homeschooled student. Does the school offer full, are they able to participate at North Marion? How does that work and how does the
If
school
they
fund
reside,
it? And
if they reside in our school district, they have access to play on our sports teams.
even though none of the funding comes to the school?
Correct.
Okay.
Anything else? Would anybody wanna throw a motion out, or would you rather wait till the March meeting?
Is this the policy that we just need to adopt or re-adopt?
It's the approving the criteria and the procedures for transfers in.
Jess, can you
and-
scroll up a little bit?
Just a second. Sorry, it's really hard to do both.
So it's this piece here, correct, Diane?
Yeah.
That we're approving these openings for allowing students in. So essentially, we're saying, we'll take anybody K through 11 and we'll take it on a case by case on grade 12.
Okay,
That's essentially what we're asking for. Is that correct, Diane?
Correct.
but no verbiage on the way out.
I mean, we take those on case by case, and if we don't need your approval on, that's an administrative decision on whether to let them out or not.
Why is grade 12 a case by case?
It's because. So, often when we see like 12th graders trying to come into a school, they've been somewhere else and they're trying to come in. They're often credit deficient or having other attendance issues that might make graduation hard. And if we bring them in and they're not set up to graduate on time, they will likely end up counting as a dropout for us. And so we really have to consider, is this a good fit? Is this a student who's on track? There are things we cannot consider, but those kind of things we can take into consideration. Is this really, are you trying to run away from our problem and think we're gonna solve it?
What can you not consider then?
You can't consider if they have an education plan, like a special, like an IEP, and you can't look at behavior. So we can't ask for like, well, were they in trouble at their old school? Right? Is there
Correct.
anything else? Yeah, those two
Actually, you
things.
kind of use that hardship lens.
Yes.
And I'll say that it's not uncommon, that's how it's been for a while.
Yeah.
However, this language materially isn't any different than what we were doing
No.
last year.
Right.
So with that, I will propose or make a motion that we adopt this criteria for the next school year.
A second. So hearing a first and a second, I'll just reread that we are approving or adopting the recommended criteria and guidelines for transfers in and out You still good for 26-27 school year?
Thank you.
Yes?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, second. Okay, any discussion? Hearing none, we'll move to a vote.
Looks like we're more open coming in and we're a little more restrictive going out, and I think that's probably to our benefit.
I'd agree.
Financially at least,
You good?
I am.
Okay. Moving to a vote, all those in favor say aye.
I-
Opposed, motion carries. Thanks, Diane.
Diane appreciates that vote too.
I'm getting started.
Yeah. All right, we have a brief strategic planning update, Des.
Yeah, so as we presented last week, we are in the process of starting to flesh out the strategic plan. Last week, our last meeting with the team, we brought to them some of the actual strategic indicators that we would like to look at and kind of voted on where we would like to see our energy placed. So I'm scrolling down, trying not to make anyone too dizzy. So right now we are looking at things like performance indicator number 1 with student achievement. We're looking at strengthening student growth, proficiency, and readiness. I will say we got some really good feedback on this one specifically. Our initial wording was more about increasing our test scores, which is absolutely important. But what we kind of recognized is suddenly when we think about the strategic initiatives associated with that, it was like, how do we increase our test scores? And it started becoming more test taking strategies and getting more kids to take the test versus getting them more proficient in the skills that allow them to be successful on the test. So we shifted some wording to really focus on making sure students have the knowledge and skills needed to be successful on those tests. Improving student attendance, access to rigorous coursework, and improving early literacy and grade level reading proficiency. Specifically, we wanted to have that one in there because of the number of grants we're specifically receiving around literacy. In culture and community, we identified improving school climate with a sense of belonging, fostering pride, belonging, and in community engagement, expanding and sustaining our community partnerships. And then for our talent development, recruit, retrain, and develop a high qualified, diverse workforce, ensure staff feel valued, supported, and connected, and ensure consistent and meaningful staff evaluation processes. From here, our next meeting, we're going to take each of those different strategic performance indicators, and we're looking at what data would we use to measure whether or not we're being successful. And then our next meeting after that, we'll have an opportunity to brainstorm what are the strategic initiatives that we can put into place that would help us achieve those goals. So what are the different programs we might want to look at? What are the things that are currently working that we want to shore up or find ways to scale them to larger impact, etc. So we're excited for the work we had. We had a really rigorous discussion at our last meeting. It was, I think the thing people on that team were really waiting for is to engage in a little bit of a debate about where do we really want to put our focus. And I'm excited to see where we can go as we look more in depth at the data and the initiatives that we could do to put these into place. So right now, just like every time we kind of decide something, I plop it in its spot in the document, and we're just going to keep building it out. Any questions?
Does this, at this point in the process, are we still maintaining a pretty tight focus?
Yeah, those three,
I think if you go back to the very top with the wheel, I mean, we're still talking about the 3 things that matter most. We're talking about student achievement. With at the top of that circle. And then I think what's important is strengthening our culture and community. And then you do that by bringing in and maintaining great talent. And those other things around there, having strong systems, having great accountability. And leadership, those things, hold those things together. So it's still focused. And then, delving that out is really looking at we're at that point is how are we going to measure whether we're doing those things or not? And then what are the strategies that we think we might employ to do that? So I still think it's pretty focused.
Okay.
Yeah,
I just want to make.
I like where it's
Still-
going.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You
it's not leaving.
Spread out too far.
It's not leaving this. So
Excellent.
I think when you talk about the student achievement piece, there are like 4 pretty broad areas, but they're all pointing back to, you know, student achievement.
Mhm.
And all four also pointing to the things we're measured by the state on with our school report card and all the grants that we get. Those specific things have data points we have to be accountable to.
And I think the culture and community pieces is really something that, you know, what I've, in my year and a half here, about strengthening the community partnerships, getting the community more involved in the schools, better communication with our communities, things like that. So I still think that's really important. And it really goes to what Kim was talking about in terms of the budgeting piece is, you know, we need to make and celebrate what's great about North Marion and get more people excited about potentially bringing their kids here as well. So.
Well, I would just say excellent work. I love where it's going. And I love the focus and I appreciate all the time and energy and effort that staff and volunteers are putting forth to create the strategic plan.
Yeah, and the
Gives us a roadmap.
that feedback we've gotten from that team has just been like, it's fun listening to people talk about where we could go and just the brainstorm, the discussion last time, you know, every time we planned like, oh, we're gonna have 30 minutes, we're gonna be good. And then it's like 55 minutes later, and the discussion's been so good though, that it's hard to stop it. You know, you don't wanna stop it because this is where that voice is so valuable. So I really appreciate the work that the volunteer work that they're doing as well.
All right, moving on.
Yeah, we have a couple policies for first reading. The sick time policy. And just so on this one, we've met with both unions about this, just because we didn't want this to catch them off guard. In talking about sick time, but there's a few changes want to highlight in here. So the first one where we talk about and where it says allow an eligible employee to access a minimum of 40 hours of paid sick time. So part of Oregon has a sick time law, and so part of it, when that came into effect, districts had sick leave for a long time, so these kind of married together. And so we just added the word a minimum of 40 hours so that we weren't so having to be, we've got people with different levels. We just know that a minimum is going to be the minimum there. And then we struck out the front loading piece of that because while our contracts require that we front load like teachers with sick leave, we might have summer student workers. We're not gonna front load summer student workers with hours of vacation or hours of sick leave. So by striking that language doesn't change what we do, what's in our collective bargaining agreements. The way this is we would have had to do that for everybody, including summer student workers. So that's the reason for the strikeout there. And Kim, if I misspeak on anything, please feel free to jump in. So this next piece here is we allow employees to carry the maximum number of eligible hours of sick leave from one year to the next. So unused sick leave just rolls over from year after year. And so now some districts, you know, I looked at some different policies in different places. Some school districts do cap the amount of sick leave that can be used in a given year, and our district has not done that. And I don't think that we should necessarily consider doing that. But one of the things we've talked about, we've talked plenty with our associations about is we also don't necessarily have done an effective job of directing people towards protected leave under state and federal laws. And so what we're trying to do here is when an employee does go beyond what their annual accrual is, so if they get 80 hours of sick leave, as an example, if they go beyond that, this policy doesn't shut that off, but it does allow us to start looking at attendance and attendance concerns and actually trying to get employees that if they are under what I refer to as a qualifying event for FMLA or OFLA, get that protection, and then they can use the unlimited number of hours that they have accrued. But right now the district hasn't necessarily directed people towards those protected leaves. And I view those as a shield. If somebody is on a protected leave, their benefits, their attendance, the district doesn't, I mean, they've been approved under a federal or state program. So we're not going to address attendance concerns, things of that nature. So that's what this language is aiming to do. We've had good conversations with the associations about it. They don't have any concerns with this, and so it's really a more of an attempt to try to raise some attendance issues and also try to direct people towards protected leaves.
Well, does that shift the liability from a salary expense for the district to the insurance payment for the leave?
No,
No,
we still are paying for the leave, I mean, if an employee is on a protected leave, there's two pieces, the insurance as, the health insurance, is that what we're referring to in that question?
The paid family and medical leave insurance, which I realize the district pays premiums for.
Correct.
But the question is whether the way we were allowing leave before, we were just paying the salary, same as they would be working. Instead of, maybe I misunderstood that the thrust is to get them under the insurance.
not necessarily insurance, it's under a protected leave program. So if someone has a qualifying event, I'll use me as an example. When I was working in Tiger 12th and I got rear-ended one time and was out for 2 weeks. And immediately my district called me and said, you need to be on protected leave. You know, so you need to be, your event covers you for that. And, or this leave will, or this, the federal or state program will protect you. Okay, and our district has not had those practices of if someone has a qualifying event of having them sign up for FEMLA or OFLA, and then all of their job protections, their benefits are all protected. So this is really trying to implement the programs that are already there.
But doesn't that insurance then pay some of that expense?
Potentially, you know,
Talking about.
you're talking about paid leave Oregon or paid family
Yeah,
medical leave.
Right,
Which is
they're
actually
both listed here.
another piece to FEMLA and OFLA. So FEMLA and OFLA are job and benefit protections. They do not cover any pay. Paid leave Oregon is pay replacement concurrent with FEMLA or OFLA.
But that's through the state, not the.
And that is,
It's a whole different process.
we
Yeah.
we and the employees both pay premiums on every dollar into basically a trust. And then if an employee qualifies for paid family medical leave, they will then receive pay from, we actually use an equivalent plan, third party, or, you know, it could be from the state if a district went that way. So employees may be receiving pay from Paid Leave Oregon. They may be using their sick leave from us also. And they may still be on a protected leave. And so we're really trying to align extended leaves with the protection that employees deserve, so that if things, you know, turn for them or something, that we can't call and, you know, have any kind of attendance conversations. It's hands off to an employee if they're on FEMLA or OFLA.
And this is this is in alignment with how the state and federal laws read. From a different industry, this is exactly how it is carried out.
And one of the things, what I've explained to both associations about is, let's say someone has a, you know, bad situation happen, and I'm aware of their situation, and they have a lot of sick leave, and they are using their sick leave, and because I know their situation, I'm empathetic with that, and so then I'm like, yeah, we're not gonna bother them. And then another employee has maybe excessive leave, and maybe I'm more suspicious about that. And so then I start to try to employ an attendance standard to that. I can't do that. I can't be moved with empathy on one employee and be suspicious on another employee. I need to have a set standard by which I decide I need to take some attendance, or if they're protected under protected leave, know that hands off.
It doesn't really matter what you think of that.
It doesn't matter what I think.
I mean, really, all we're doing is following the law. But
Yeah.
That's
I
exactly.
mean, it's pretty simple what we're doing here.
Yes.
Is there a maximum number of hours?
If people have over 1,000 hours of sick leave.
Wow. Generous.
It's more that they just don't get, they like,
Yeah.
I will tell you, and it, you know, when you get into PERS and stuff, it's a benefit, and so I was told as a young teacher, like, don't take your sick leave unless you're dying, like literally dying, and you'd save it and come to school sick, so. That's a lot of it, right? People just, they save up, they just don't use it,
Mhm.
come to school.
And is it paid out
work
at
through
the
everything.
end, like?
They wouldn't
No.
do it if,
So if you are a tier 1 or tier 2, it is part of your PERS calculation. It can be one of your PERS
Yeah.
calculations. Okay,
And that's the other thing they told you.
All right, let's move on.
all right. So at our last board meeting, we were talking about ending fund balance, and Kim referenced that today in her presentation. And so this is standard OSBA policy. And so I wanted to show you a couple things that we did a little differently here. And so I just kind of threw out the bracketed language there. So the board directs the superintendent to manage the currently adopted district budget in a way to strive. So here's where I kind of played with the wording here, is that we are striving for an ending fund cash balance of 10% of the total adopted general fund revenue. The ending fund cash balance may not be less than 8% of the total adopted general fund revenues without a resolution from the board acknowledging the district's ending fund balance is lower than board policy. So I've seen some different things with this one. And so, that's what Kim and I came up with.
What is the present policy?
We don't have one.
wasn't our discussion,
Digging for it.
didn't our previous discussion say though that we wouldn't be, well, we were like 4 or 5%, if I
Yeah.
remember, we weren't meeting.
Oh, we're not meeting this.
Not even close.
Yeah,
At one point, I
Correct.
think, when we were down to like 3.5,
If
weren't we?
we would
Yeah.
agree to this policy, then we would need to, at the same time, resolve to allow.
yeah, I think you know, if the
Exactly.
board adopted the policy, let's say next month, and make a resolution that it's basically acknowledging that we are outside of board policy. And so if the current ending fund balance is 3%, 4%, then we're acknowledging that piece.
I don't know if it's on here or not, one of the footnotes says some are 5 to 15, but others are 3 to 8, and we're probably within that range.
And the hard part is in that footnote, it starts talking about whether it's of total budgeted revenues or general fund revenues. And so, you really get, if you start thinking about, there's general fund is our money that we can decide essentially what to do with. Grants, that is considered restricted revenue.
Yeah.
You are given it and you can only use it for X and Y. Debt service money or student body funds, there are revenues in our budget that we talked a lot about this and how you do that. Your general fund is the money that you have available to utilize or save as you wish. Grants, you're gonna use it or lose it, student body funds, those are the funds for the students, and debt service is debt service. You're gonna be making your debt service payments. And so, having this discussion is important to make sure that we understand the difference between a total adopted revenues
Mhm.
percentage or a general fund adopted revenues
Here you're
percentage.
saying general fund, so it's a slightly lower number that we could comply with.
The-
Meet the minimum.
The revenue number, it would be slightly lower than instead of $41 million of revenue, and I was just looking it up, I'm not gonna quote it off the top of my head, but it's much lower than that. So, that's where a 10% strive for is more achievable. If we said 10% of total adopted revenues, then I think that would be a difficult.
If you take
Cool.
your pie chart and how many things you can actually adjust, there's limitations to.
Yeah,
To where you can get to, and I think 28's the number last year. if
I was gonna say
recall.
20, I don't.
So if you're at 28 and we know what our number was right now, we're not
Yeah,
there, so.
yeah,
No, we're
27,
far from there.
Mhm.
27.1, so yeah.
So what about our mystery transportation money that we won't know till May of 2027? Where would that fall?
That's a great question, because technically, according to the state, I even reached out to them and said, can I put that somewhere else? Can I take it
Yeah,
out
and
of
we
general?
might earmark it somewhere.
Exactly, and they said it really has to stay in your general fund per, you know, the guidelines, and so. When we say 10%, and we may know that we have 300 and some, you know,
Yeah.
thousand that, or roughly 300,000 that we may have to pay back. Yeah, that is why maybe being a little bit more generous and trying to strive for a 10%. Is important. I do think a public acknowledgement, if we get below a certain threshold, is important to help avoid. Slides, if you will. I mean, you know, my history, I went through a very difficult time with another district, and being aware of the trend lines in things is absolutely critical. You know, 1 year can, yes, you can absolutely turn things around in 1 year, but when the trend line is setting up the warning flags, you know, I think it requires a transparent communication to our stakeholders that this is a conscious decision, that we do need to do this because the roof fell in or somewhere, or, you know, I mean, there are times where a choice must be made.
How does it work then if you're trying to adopt it mid-budget? Like, when's the right time to start this process? Because if you've already formed a budget and then you're later coming out trying to come up with a goal percentage to stay within a threshold, how do you do that with a budget that's already baked?
So I think that's why we made sure to have a strive for and acknowledge when we
Not, okay.
choose not to. So that would be something to consider, the timing of adoption, I guess. That's an excellent
Just a
point.
thought, yeah.
That I will tell you that part of this is to know how to build the budget for next year. Trying to say, how much do we want to have in the bank on June 30th, 2027? How much of that ending fund balance to build a budget for next year? We need to know the end goal.
Cause you have to work backwards on it really to do it.
We have our resources. Where do we need to end? So what do we have to work with? And so that's why this is here for you today.
Well, I for one, thank you for bringing this budget forward that I also did not know existed. So. This policy.
So, you know, in our other times when we brought first readings before you, you've given me feedback, you know, we don't need to do a full-blown spreadsheet like we've done before when we've had 40 policies. We've got 2 policies. So Jenny's having PTSD over there. So if there's feedback on either the sick leave, sick time policy or the fund balance policy, let me know in the next week or so. And otherwise, we'll bring these back as they are here for adoption at the March meeting.
You said these were boilerplate to set up OSBA, essentially.
The fund balance almost is entirely. I mean, I played around with that strive. I didn't find anybody that had that striving language. I mean, the key part for me was having a board resolution at some point. So there's a line there that the board has. So that's, I hadn't seen that elsewhere, but that's kind of some conversation Kim and I had. The sick time one is mostly boilerplate with, again, a little bit, and I did run that by Elizabeth Pole as well, just to make sure that I was not encroaching on any kind of issues there, and also a reason why I ran it by both unions before, which is not normally what I do, but I didn't want that to catch them by surprise either, so.
Yep. March.
All right. All right, well, speaking of what happens next March, as I get my evaluation, so. This year, I essentially followed the same template that I used last year, and so when we're looking at these slides that are in green with the visionary district leadership, so these bullets are from the COSA, which is the superintendent group, and the OSBA, which is your group. These are kind of the bullet points that fall under each of these. So this isn't words that I made up. These come from an evaluation handbook. So under each one of these slides, so we'll go to the next one, Des. So I just, instead of having a lot of words, I chose to use images. And I'm not going to belabor a lot of this. It's just to kind of show you the work that I'm doing that aligns to that previous one. So under visionary leadership, the big bulk of that work is working on the strategic plan. So Move on to the next one. So ethical and professional norms standards. So things that I have done to address that. So we have an administrative handbook that really outlines how we conduct ourselves as administrators. And set some guidelines there, and there's more handbooks to come that fall under some other areas, so we'll go ahead and move on to the next one. Inclusive district culture, so here's some things that we're doing to address that. So we have an early literacy program, we have summer programs, within our, you know, this wheel that and puzzle that you see, that's been our focus for this year. While we were in between having, not having a strategic plan. And I think that when you look, especially at that supporting language acquisition and at the later levels, language development, really go to that inclusive, that and standard on inclusivity. Instructional leadership and improvement. So this is, you've seen this one from every single principal that's come before you has referenced this year. The educator effectiveness was the implementation of our new teachers evaluation rubric and evaluation system. Again, supporting language acquisition is a measure, as a key component of our academic achievement goals. And then with our collaborative teams is really getting our teacher teams working together more collaboratively, which they are doing almost on every early release Wednesday. Communication and community relations. So we've developed a greenhouse there on the right, which is an internal place that we communicate with staff and put a lot of resources. We've just started a staff newsletter that we did. Received a copy of that. Another one's coming out this week. And in general, I try to keep you all up to date communication wise, keep our staffs up to date with things that are happening in their building. So communication is something that I'm proud of and think that we do a pretty good job, but it's also one of those areas that you never arrive at the mountaintop of communication. So you can always do better in that area. Effective organizational management. So we have a new employee handbook. We ratified an agreement with our classified union last spring. We're in the middle of negotiations, which although we've only had one session, has been positive and productive. And I look forward to reaching an agreement with UNME this spring. And so those are some things that I've worked on.
And all the job descriptions.
Yes, thank you. All the job descriptions. Yes, so we have all new job descriptions for our classified folks, all new job descriptions for our licensed folks. They are on the website. The administrative, confidential, and supervisory positions are coming up as we finalize them. And a big one that we want to finish up this year is for coaches and advisors, people that are doing clubs and things of that nature. Effective financial management, trying to align those budget to district priorities, district resources, and regular updates to the board, which I appreciate Kim being able to do for us. So, and there's just some examples of some things that we've brought before you related to that area. Policy, governance, and advocacy. So again, I keep you guys updated regularly on board updates, probably more than you want. I've heard Merle say that I increased his reading quite a bit. So he said that last year to me about the amount of reading that he's had to do since I've gotten here. So, and I just took a clip of the instructional materials policy that we brought for you this year, and just even tonight, bringing in new policies. So I think policy work, it really is important work. I know sometimes it can be the afterthought in some places, but I really think it should be the forethought, because it really solidifies things before you actually go and enact anything. You should be establishing policy for that, for whatever you want to be doing. So that's it. So
I'll just add to it that since you've received this documentation, I don't know what time is it, 7? I may or may not send out the eval form today, but I'll probably definitely send it out by tomorrow night. And again, there's like a hard date on that. It's anonymous. It's gonna be sent to your North Marion emails, and then we'll have it come back. So if I blanket email you like, did you do your evaluation? It's really because I don't know. I'm not gonna go down IP address rabbit holes, so. I will say, I expect it to be done too. Just throwing that out there.
She'll call you.
Well, that's all I've got, unless there's questions.
Anything? And Blake, did you see the one last year? It's Microsoft Born. It has tons of information in there.
Sounds good.
Okay.
It doesn't have anything to do with the subject, but I have really enjoyed watching North Marion varsity basketball. We had a great win, and then we had one we should have,
Oh,
just so close. And then we had a good win last week too.
Yeah,
So, just enjoy it.
well, and I plan to go to State tomorrow night to watch watch that game, so.
Thanks, Brian. All right. So any other board action? We're all good, right, Diane?
Yes.
Okay, we're gonna adjourn, but I need to read the executive session. And before we adjourn, really quick. So the board will now be going into executive session ORS 192.6602D. The board will now meet in executive session according to ORS 192.6602D to conduct deliberations with persons designated to carry on labor negotiations, collective bargaining for UNME, according to, really Diane 3 times, ORS 192.6602D. Content discussed in executive sessions is confidential except as provided by law. Board members and the media are instructed not to disclose information obtained in an executive session except when specifically authorized to do so or as required by law. Members of the media may attend executive sessions except in these specific instances. Deliberations with persons conducting labor negotiations, expulsion hearings, or those pertaining to confidential student medical records and litigation involving the news media. Policy BDC executive sessions. The board will not be taking any action on the content discussed tonight and will adjourn following the executive session. We will take a 2-minute break before we go into executive session.